For those of you that woke up this morning and thought, I'm going to check the news to see what's going on with Brexit, I can guess that you're all baffled and confused. Because, especially today, no one knows what's going on. There's a lot of information and misinformation going around by the pundits and all the press and everyone from both sides. So in this video, we're going to talk about what's actually happened in terms of any update on Brexit and what hasn't happened. But firstly, let's start with the latest development from the Remain side. Obviously, as you know, they're trying their best to stop Brexit. One of their plans is to force an extension to then get a second EU referendum, because obviously the 2016 referendum wasn't enough, so they want to have a second go. Now, the government have finally revealed their plan, their legal plan to actually stop this.
Others, but I cannot believe that we would provide a money resolution and allow a referendum to go forward, because this will simply cause delay, uncertainty, damage to the economy, division within the country and damage to our democracy. And the practicalities of this referendum, are another thing. The House of Commons could vote, I hope they don't, but they could vote for a motion to have a second referendum, but then you've got to say, what is the question? What is the franchise? What is the date? Can we get enough time out of the EU to do that? None of that makes sense to me.
Yeah, Remainers in Parliament don't really understand that even if they were to force the government to introduce legislation to have a second referendum, it's not like forcing the government to request an extension from the EU. It's the job of the executive because the government obviously controls the budget, the treasury, and the legal aspects of referendums. So it is up to the government to provide that money and everything else. So the executive could basically refuse it. But the second issue with the referendum is that it might not even get to that level, because the Remainers in Parliament are still divided. Half of them want a second referendum, the other half actually don't. They either want to leave with a soft deal or they want to have a general election.
The Labour whips have been consulting their MPs today, and they've been saying, what do you want, election first or referendum first? But they are divided. And today I spoke to two Labour MPs, Stephen Kinnock and Alison McGovern. They're both Remainers, but they take a different view on a referendum.
I think the public deserve the final say. I think we've had a House of Commons in deadlock for some time now.
Well, my argument would be that it would be preferable to move forward without a second referendum because of the massive uncertainty and divisiveness that could create. And
now, as we said, today's been quite chaotic in terms of the news and updates and everything. So we're going to talk about a few things that came out in the news since last night, and to show you what's actually true and what's not. First, there was an article that came out from The Sun that suggested that there is a major split among the Tory Brexiteers when it comes to Boris Johnson's Brexit deal. A major split tonight opened up among Tory Eurosceptics over whether to back Boris Johnson's Brexit deal. They suggested that Iain Duncan Smith kicked off at a meeting at Downing Street when the number 10 officials told him more about the details of the proposals. But then immediately after, this was rejected. Alex Wickham tweeted that the ERG MPs who met with number 10 today were not told the details of their Brexit proposals, contrary to reports. He also suggested that Iain Duncan Smith has said it's untrue that he kicked off at a meeting. He said that, I do not know what the arrangement is going to be and was not told.
Can I just ask you, there's a report in one of the newspapers today that you, and I'm quoting them, exploded in number 10. Is that true?
Actually, I've already put out a statement on that. I rushed out of Downing Street last night because I had to get to my constituency, so didn't say anything to the media. That seems to have been immediately been assumed that I was angry. I wasn't. I was desperately trying to get to the tube to get trapped on the central line, so the rush was a bit waste of time. So I'm not in a position to be happy, angry, or in any way sad about it. I simply went in to try and help the government figure out how they protect Britain's sovereign right to make decisions without being imposed upon by the European Union during the period before we finally complete a free trade deal.
The next fake news of the day was earlier today when Sky News released a breaking news. If you have the Sky News app on your phone, you probably got the notification saying that confirmed that the government is going to get a Brexit extension from the European Union. In reality, that wasn't the case. Sky News said that the Prime Minister will write a letter to the EU asking for a Brexit delay if no deal is done by Saturday. Firstly, that's nothing new because the government already confirmed that they will abide by the law. This was a couple of weeks ago. They said, fine, we will send a letter, but it has nothing to do with getting the actual extension. This was the Brexit Secretary, Stephen Barclay, confirming this when he was asked earlier at a committee.
Taken given to the court was that subject to section 1.5, in the event that neither of the conditions set out in sections 1.1 and 1.2 is satisfied, he will send a letter in the form set out in the schedule. Can you confirm for the committee, as the Secretary of State, that in those circumstances he will send the letter?
I confirm that the government will abide by what is set out in that letter.
Which will involve sending a letter, is that right?
You read it out, and I refer back to that text.
Well, that's hopeful that you have confirmed that he will send that letter.
See, those words were very carefully chosen by the Brexit Secretary. Now, next fake news. Tony Connolly from RTE said that 2 senior EU sources have said that the main stumbling block to a deal has been removed, with the DUP accepting the latest proposals on consent. Optimism, a deal can now be done. Literally minutes later, the DUP leader Arlene Foster said, EU sources are talking nonsense. Discussions continue. It needs to be a sensible deal which unionists and nationalists can support. This goes back to the whole point of don't just believe whatever you hear in the media, whether it's from the mainstream or the Remain media or the pundits. Pundits don't know anything. And there's a lot of misinformation going around and from both sides. Just because someone says something on Twitter doesn't mean it's true. Now, going back to the whole second referendum and Remainers' push to have that, obviously the government has the legal privilege to have to block that opportunity. And the only way they could get their second referendum is not by adding some sort of amendment, is to actually have a general election and win that election. But that's also not easy for them. And that's thanks to Boris Johnson. Ever since he became Conservative leader and Prime Minister, the Tories have been going up and up, and whilst other parties, Labour, Lib Dems, the Brexit Party and Greens, are basically not doing too well. And that's mainly because the majority of Brexiteers are currently trusting Boris to deliver Brexit by the end of this month. Obviously, if that doesn't happen, especially if it's his fault, then the polls are going to completely change, and you could see the Brexit Party actually leading in the polls. Now, to double check what's actually happening this week, today, Wednesday, the 16th of October, is the final deadline when it comes to both sides actually agreeing to some sort of arrangement. This is the deadline that the EU keep changing. It was supposed to be last night, midnight, and now it's tonight. So don't be surprised if that doesn't happen. And then the next 2 days, they're going to be discussing it at the EU summit. And then Saturday is when Boris Johnson is going to be bringing back the MPs to potentially vote on the new deal. Or if not, then he's going to have to make a statement to see what the next plan is. Now, the funny thing about the Saturday parliamentary sitting is that obviously this is the first time since the 80s that this has actually happened in Parliament. And this was called by Boris because that's the final day, the deadline to send the extension request letter if nothing happens. But now Remainers, the same Remainers who are complaining about Boris Johnson shutting down Parliament, they actually want to shut down Parliament. They don't want Saturday to happen. Remainers are now trying to prevent Parliament from sitting on Saturday because they know that Boris might do something. Seriously, the level of desperation from the Remain side is astonishing. For example, there are 37 British MEPs, not even real MPs, MEPs, who have signed a letter to the European Union to stop Brexit. I mean, no one's going to care about you. Even the EU don't take you seriously. This was a Brexit leak. 37 British MEPs go behind Boris's back to demand a Brexit extension from the EU. This was a leaked letter that shows that these MEPs are asking the President of the European Council to give the UK an extension. In the letter, they point out that Boris Johnson does not represent the views of the entire nation. Every single opposition party now wants to have a second referendum, and the polls indicate that the majority of the UK public is likely to vote Remain. Yeah, they're saying that the British public are now pro-Remain. Let's have a look at the latest polls. Thinking about the UK leaving the EU, which of the following would be your preferred outcome? 42% for Remain and 50% for Leave. Do you support or oppose a second EU referendum with deal, no deal and Remain options included? 45% oppose, 41% support. Regardless of how you voted in the 2016 EU referendum, do you support or oppose the UK abiding by the referendum result and leaving the EU? 54% support, 32% oppose. Well, that backfired massively. Now, those 37 MEPs, obviously no one's taking them seriously, including the EU, but there is a group of actual MPs, the Remain Alliance, from various parties, who are being sent to Brussels, who left today on a Eurostar train to have again, secret talks with the EU to see how they can stop Brexit, and this is just getting ridiculous. Now, as we can see, we have MPs from the SNP, the Lib Dems, a former Tory who's now not really a Tory, Green, Labour, and Plaid Cymru. You know, apparently they're still a thing. Now, in my opinion, this is basically the worst version of Anchorman. And if we were to do a remake, I prefer to have these guys than the losers over there. You know, my biggest problem with these Remain MPs going to Brussels today is the fact that they're actually going to come back to London eventually. Now, before our final words, let's have a look at Mark Francois, the Conservative MP and Brexiteer, and his response to Steve Bray, the Remain activist, who keeps interrupting every interview that happens in Westminster.
Not really. We had talks. Brexit! If we leave, it will be delightful that this idiot will shut up.
Well, I hope Mark is right, but I doubt that guy's ever going to shut up. Now, as I said, try not to believe any headlines you see and whatever you hear in the Remain stream media and the pundits, but the pundits don't know anything. No one knows anything. There's a lot of people coming out saying this current deal, the Brexit deal, is the best deal or is the worst deal, is some sort of maze deal. No one knows anything because there's no deal. There are only proposals and counter-proposals. There's no final version of the deal. Now, we're all waiting to see the final version. If it's a good deal, that we're not going to be tied to the EU, whether it's the customs union, our fisheries, single market, ECJ, all this, then obviously, you know, there's no problem with that because it's going to lead to a free trade agreement. And if not, if it's a bad deal, obviously we won't support it and we will prefer to leave without a deal. So let's just not panic just yet because we don't know if there's even going to be a deal agreed. And the other issue is that a lot of people are afraid that this could be a bad deal. Mathematically, it's impossible that a bad deal would go through Parliament anyway. So if a deal passes the parliamentary stage, that means it's good enough. If the DUP and the ERG and the Brexit side decide to back it, then it must be good, obviously. You know, we're going to do our own research and we're going to decide ourselves if it's good or bad. But generally speaking, if the DUP and ERG and the Brexit party back it, then it should be fine. And otherwise, don't worry that, you know, we will be leaving with a bad deal. It's basically impossible. We don't have the numbers. The government don't have the numbers to pass a soft Brexit because the Remain side are now no longer compromising. They just want to completely stop Brexit. There was a time that they wanted a soft deal and not anymore. They just want to cancel Brexit and that's fine because we're going to win. Now, with just over 2 weeks to go to Brexit, we still have our merchandise page up with our Brexit t-shirts and coffee mugs and phone cases. So if you want to have a look at that, we have a number of different designs. The link is in the description. If you have any design ideas, you could contact me on social media, Twitter or Instagram. You can find them down here. If you want to customize any t-shirts, let me know and I'll try to make it happen. As always, don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell next to it so you get notified when I release a new video. Videos come out every day at 5:45 PM UK time. And as always, I'm Tousi, and I'll see you tomorrow with a new video.